Well, thank you for meeting with me. This is
Yeah.
not exactly the circumstances I think any of us were expecting to meet under.
Oh, no, of course not. This has all been challenge for all of us, I believe.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Now you're in Boone.
I am. Yeah.
Okay, and you like private residence or over at the Wesley Foundation? I'm not sure how that works for whoever's in charge of the Wesley Foundation.
Yeah. So I believe when that was started back in the 50s, there was an actual apartment upstairs that I believe was for the campus pastor or the director. That got used later down the road for students. It was rented out to students at a low, kind of like a low cost apartment place. And we recently, the board last year, prior to my coming on board, decided it was kind of, I guess, think some liability issues that they decided to move away from even having residents in there. So I live right now, I'm in a student apartment um, waiting to transition into some more adult living situation around here. But you have
Okay.
to jump on and grab on what you can when you move in the middle of a year.
Yeah, I think that's what Boone realtors call professional uh, realty.
Mm,
As my understanding was that there's realty that's actually just student apartments, and then there's professional realty.
yeah.
That's yeah, it's part of the navigating that weird housing market in Boone.
Oh yeah, it's a crazy thing. It sure is.
Okay, so yeah, I guess basically what we extended the invitation to you to talk to us about campus ministry because my students have been working on projects looking at religion and spirituality among college students, and we've been reading through studies about what is going on with American college students, and much of that work it has been focused on millennials, and so it really hasn't caught up yet to college students today, Gen Z
Right.
folks. And so we've been working to go through what that literature says and catching up to, well, what's going on now. And I think that an important part of campus life in general has been what do students do when they end up going to college? I mean, there are many for many it's leaving your house for the first time, leaving your family, possibly moving away from the congregation or religious community that you grew up in and setting out on your own. And for some, it's a question of how do we maintain those ties? How do we maintain those faith connections to a community? How do we find a new community? And for many, as the research has shown, at least for millennials, it was kind of a fading away, a disconnection. Certainly, if you measure faith community participation by having a house of worship, going to church on a Sunday or going to mosque on a Friday, and then coming to a completely new town and finding that those patterns of behavior just go away. You're sleeping through the morning on a Sunday. You're
Right.
you're kind of sneaking in prayer when you can as a Muslim student on campus on a Friday because there's not a mosque for 2 hours drive, and so on. And so I really appreciate having a campus minister, someone whose job is worrying about these issues, to come talk to me and vicariously my students. So I to admit to my students, I had sent you some questions beforehand to
Yeah.
ponder,
Yeah.
and if it's okay with you, I mean, I'll go through some of those questions, and if you have uh, things you want to raise that I didn't ask about that I should have, feel free to raise those points, and don't mind me if I ask some follow-up questions.
Yeah. It's perfect. We'll see
Okay.
where it goes.
Okay, so I guess the big thing, and this wasn't exactly a question I sent you, but it's probably something that I should have, and it's inferred in my other questions. What exactly does a campus minister do at particularly a Wesley Foundation?
Yes, that's a great question. I believe that is something I'm still figuring out fully what that entails. So my understanding in all of this, for students that don't know, I started in January. So
Oh,
this
welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so
Not exactly a great semester to start, but
yeah,
it can only go up from here.
exactly,
Let's
exactly.
hope.
So I'm still in the learning phase of all what happens not only at the Wesley Foundation, but also how we are involved um, in the Appalachian Spiritual Life Association. So let me share with you that kind of helps guide what a campus minister does. Um, so the Spiritual Life Association is the group of all campus ministries at Appalachian State, and all campus ministers are a part of that, and that's how we are recognized as clubs. And we have that relationship with the university. If we weren't a part of that group, then we wouldn't be recognized by the university to do what we're allowed to do on campus. Um, so we gather together about once a month. Well, now it's, that's kind of whenever we gather now at this point. But typically it's a monthly gathering of all of the campus ministers, and you kind of just chit chat about how we can work together, what's going on in the university. And that kind of trickles down into what do I do as I guess the liaison of sorts for the Wesley Foundation to the university. So part of our purpose is, and part of the great thing about the Wesley Foundation is, I think we're one of, I think there's three total out of all of the religious organizations on campus that have their own physical presence on campus. You have the Catholics Campus Ministry, which is right here near the Home Center, and then we're up behind Peacock. But that's an interesting thing in and of itself that we're able to have that presence. But the point of that, to say that, is as the campus minister, it is my duty to share with the university and all students that that building is open to every single student that walks by it. It is a place where you can hang out, you can watch TV, it can be a place of study, it can be a place of, do you need to talk with other students? It's almost a student union kind of in and of itself a little bit. It's a safe place to practice and to share your religion and what it is you may believe, and talk about it. So that's part of my role, is to help facilitate that facility and have it available to all students. Another thing is to, again, the Spiritual Life Association, be a part of those meetings, but also that's how we have presidents. So we don't call them, clubs have presidents. We don't call ours presidents. Now, the university recognizes them as presidents, but we call them as just our student leadership. And so they're the liaison to the club expo, or the club organization.
Yeah.
All of that, all of the clubs, they all come together. So they have to have those meetings periodically with the presidents and all that. So I rely heavily upon student leadership to be representatives on campus. I'm not one of those individuals that's going to go around campus and like Bible thump. That's not who I am.
You would need to find a new corner of Sanford Mall.
Right. Right. So that you're not going to see a Wesley presence like that. You're going to see more or less our students talking to other students about, hey, do you have these gifts of music or of hospitality? Do you like to cook? Do you like to serve? Wesley's here for that. We have all of those available resources for you. Come be a part of it. So it's not like, hey, do you believe? You believe, then you can come. No, it's, hey, what do you have to offer? And come hang out with me. And we have all of this space that we are able to share with each other. So that's kind of what I do right now, is just make everything I possibly can available to our students, in which they are sent out to go and share with other students.
Okay. And so does one wake up one morning in high school or college or on a summer camp and say, I think I want to grow up to be a campus minister?
No,
How does that work? How does that
not
work?
for me at least. So I'll explain, I guess, briefly a little bit about how I moved into such a role. I would say in the Wesleyan tradition, maybe your students already know this, but we have this thing, movements of grace, that we call. Um, so one of this is prevenient grace, and what we understand about that is the grace that goes before us. And that's how, when we look back and be like, oh man, that's been God all along doing this in and through me, and I'm just now realizing it. And I look back and I go back to when I was 5 or 6 years old. And that's when I started to develop a love for organ music, and able to go up after worship and just pick on the keys of the organ, and learn that by ear. So I say that to say, over the next, through high school, 7 years old, and through high school, through college, part of my role was always in music ministry. So in high school, in college, I would go home, play the organ for worship in times of interim, opportunities. And then I left college. So I went to App. I graduated from App in 2008. And my whole dream, so you hear what I'm saying, my whole dream was to be a news anchor. I wanted to be a reporter. And so I had the communications degree from App, and I actually went to work at WBTV in Charlotte for 3 years and did video editing. And it was during that time that I started to feel, how things happen in the local church. Maybe your students know this as well. Churches have these ups and downs, and times of great, just great things are going on, and then times of like, this church ain't gonna make it. And we were in the midst of one of those very dark places. And I was working overnights for the morning show. I was still doing music ministry at the church. And in the midst of this crazy schedule I was a part of, something started happening with my heart. I don't know if it was anxiety attacks, but every time I went to go to sleep, it wasn't really like acid reflux. It was just like this pressure right here in my chest. And what I came to realize from that was I was having an internal struggle of, do I want to continue on what I want to do, or do I need to continue and move forward in what I feel a passion for, and what I love in music ministry? And so I turned in my 2-week resignation in news, and I went to seminary. Which is another story in itself, how I got there. But went to seminary, and with the whole idea of that I would continue in music ministry. It was my last semester in seminary where, again, it was that tightening in the chest. And not everybody has the same type calling. Other people distinguish this, just to make that clear. Some people hear like God directly say, this is exactly how this is going to work. Other people, it could be years of discernment and feelings. Me, it was this just weird physical, like, tightening of the chest. And I realized that I was learning a lot, and I was supposed to do more than music ministry. And so that's when, just through miraculous acts of God, I was quickly certified as a candidate for ministry in the United Methodist Church. And I'll say that within 4 months of candidacy, I was then put into my first appointment after graduation. So I hate to be long-winded, and
oh no, not at all. And before you end up in your first appointment on the old Sawdust Trail, as it was once referred to for Wesleyan itinerancy, the seminary now, the Methodist Church, other Protestant denominations have a network of seminaries all across the country. Right. Our nearest for us is at Duke University. Was that where you were at, or did you go elsewhere?
No, I did not attend Duke. So we have the United Methodist Church, like you said, has a network of what they say are their United Methodist seminaries. But we also have what's called the University Senate. And they recognize other seminaries for United Methodist studies. And so like there's AME, African Methodist Episcopal seminaries. There could be like United Seminary in sometimes it can be.
Yeah, I was going to say burnout is not uncommon.
Yeah. It's a Presbyterian. They're recognized. It's down in Charlotte. I actually went to Hood Theological Seminary in Salisbury. It is sponsored by and ran by the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church.
Okay, so
And
another member of the larger Wesleyan table, the denominations that had their history, at least in this case, with the Methodist Church at some
right,
time.
right, you're right. Um, yeah, so the president at that time when I started at Hood was an ordained elder in the United Methodist Church, and he had been the president for, I mean, several years. Um, so they had a great relationship with the United Methodist Church, and had been an approved seminary, and they still are. They have a large presence of United Methodist students there. Part of the reason I went to Hood, uh, basically, one, which is a biggie, is financially. Second is because its location to Charlotte, and that's where I was practicing music ministry. So I was able to go to seminary, stay in Salisbury a few days a week, and then go back home. I didn't have to move somewhere else. Um, Third is because of its size. It's not a very large seminary, um, and so you get to have a true intimate relationship with not only other students and your colleagues, but professors. So they made it a point at Hood, and maybe some other seminaries do this as well, but I can only speak for Hood. Um, there's a word, refectory. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but it's a nice word for cafeteria, dining hall. And so they made it a point that that is a place where every person, and I think that's the definition of a refectory, every person, it doesn't matter if you're a scholar or if you're a student or if you're a community member, but you gather around the table together to dine. There is no hierarchy when you're dining around the table. And so you were able to have lunch with a professor sitting right next to you who you may have just disagreed with in class or just got a test back that you didn't want to get back, but you were able to have, a beautiful lunch right there with your professor and just have conversation, nothing to do with class, but just about life. So that was just kind of a beautiful thing about Hood Seminary. Another thing, seems like I'm putting a plug in for the seminary, but um,
Sure.
it, it's really known for its older adult population. So when I went, I was 24, 25 years old. So I was like the youngest on campus, where the median age is probably like 45, 50.
Mhm.
And they're all a lot of it, 90% are second career students. And they may be working full-time jobs and still going to school at Hood full-time. So they offer that availability to do that. So that's just kind of the beauty of that place.
But
But
then
it was
but
there.
then you got yanked out of Hood and placed in ministry position. Was it a congregational? Was it
Yes,
pastor, assistant pastorate at a congregation, and still
I
in the
was.
Charlotte area, or were you flung far afield?
So yeah, so I graduated, and in July I moved. I moved to a community of Bellwood. It's in Upper Cleveland County, about 20 minutes north of Shelby, and I was the pastor of a 3-point charge, which means there are 3 churches that um, work together under one pastor, um, and it was called the Bellwood Charge. And they had, but prior to me, they had 2 pastors who had retired. So I was on the other spectrum for them, someone who had never been a pastor before, and first time out. And it was just a beautiful thing. They helped me learn and grow in what that meant to be a pastor and how to just be a part of the community. A great first place to be a pastor. Learned a lot there. And actually, my first public prayer was my first Sunday in the pulpit. So you talk about like having no experience whatsoever, because that was not where I was intending to go, but that's how it happened.
What was the leap from from the traditional pastorate into campus ministry?
Yeah, so I was there 2.5 years, and the way we talked a little bit about itinerancy, and usually in our conference that happens in July. You move to your new position or your new appointment in July. For me, a large church in Gastonia, First Gastonia, had one of their associate pastors move to Texas. And so sometimes you have these weird mid-year moves. And my district superintendent, who is kind of like, I would say, is my boss per se, and leads a community of all of the churches in her area. It was Reverend Angela Pleasance was my DS at the time. And she called and said, "Hey, I need you to move to Gastonia to fulfill this associate position." I had not applied for it. I didn't want to move. I loved Bellwood, and that's just kind of how how it works. And I'm grateful for it. So I went to Gastonia. I started in November of 2016, and then was there for 3 years. And this past July is when I found out about the position here at App with our Wesley Foundation. And I talked with my senior pastor, who I was working under in Gastonia, about just doing something a little bit different. We'll probably get to this in a moment, but a lot of things are going on in the life of the United Methodist Church.
Yes.
And where do you want to be when certain things may take place?
Yeah.
And to be a little bit more in control, maybe is the right word, a little bit more balance in what you're able to take care of. But also being an alumnus, who doesn't want to come back to Boone if that opportunity arises. So I just put together an application and went through the process, and that's a different way also. So usually in the United Methodist Church, you don't apply for positions. And so the Wesley Foundation in our conference and all the Wesley Foundations are what we call extension ministries. And an extension ministry is something, in the simple term, I don't have the book of discipline to read all that to you, but is an appointment beyond the local church.
Yeah, so it's hospital chaplaincy, it's hospice chaplain, it's work in non-church centered places.
Right.
And that's always been tricky for the Methodist Church because it means, what is your relationship to that traditional 2.5 year itinerancy process? And sometimes you end up kind of out of that traditional churn. And okay.
Yes. So
you ended up here.
I ended up here after a long, lengthy application and interview process and learning the ropes of the paperwork of applying for extension ministry and getting all of that approved. Yes, I'm here.
So once you arrived, now I'm assuming that the previous Wesley Foundation minister, Brad Farrington, kind of sat you down, or did you ever get a chance to sit down with Brad and him lead you through the ropes and introduce you to the spiritual council and how the Wesley Foundation works at App?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that. As far as itinerancy and different appointments, when one pastor goes from their church to a new church, you only really have an hour meeting with the previous pastor. And so me and Brad did a little bit different. And the great thing about this is we were allowed to do it this way. I came up several times near the end of the semester last year and was able to be with him and just kind of watch and also begin the interaction with students as he interacted with students. So we didn't want this to be like, oh, I'm Brad, I do it this way. I'm Justin, I do it this way. We're going to butt heads. We looked at it as, okay, I'm Brad, and you all know and have known since May that I'm going to be transitioning out. This is Justin. We're working alongside to learn together how to transition the best way possible. And I think we did it pretty good. I think it showed, and this may be beneficial something for our itinerancy process in the appointment process for local churches. But I feel like that we showed the students that, we're colleagues and we're not fighting against each other. And I'm not trying to fill Brad's shoes, and Brad doesn't want me to fill Brad's shoes. And so, the short answer to the question is we worked several times together in front of the students to in the transition at the end of the semester.
Speaking of students, if I could use that to leapfrog to my
Yeah.
questions about the students. First, couple questions about the students at the Wesley Foundation itself, and then you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I want to go back to it for the second question
Yep.
set, and those are the Wesley Foundation's ministry and outreach on campus itself. So the students that are taking part in the Wesley Foundation, I assume you had a cohort of students who were part of the Wesley Foundation campus ministry. They were involved in activities and regulars there. And they've carried on, at least until we all dispersed in our diasporatic condition we're in now. Could you describe those folks? So you don't need to name them, but are they generally juniors and seniors? Are they new students? By gender, or is this a very female-dominated place at the Wesley Foundation?
Yeah, I saw.
Who are these students that are involved?
Yeah. So I would say we sort of mimic the local church in that we have more females that are involved than males. I think that's just a sign of the church. If you go to a lot of local churches, more women are involved in the roles and in the life of the church than men are. That's just kind of how it is right now. Hopefully that will start to change, and it's not a male-female thing, but that just people are able to make up the life of the church. But so a lot of our leadership roles are mostly female, and sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I would say it's almost equal. Now we do sort of limit. That's probably the wrong word, but our co-leaders that are our presidents to the university need to be upperclassmen, just to have a little bit more understanding and probably a little bit more roles before they move into such a place where they got to take on a lot of responsibility in leading the club. I use the club as university language. And that's sort of like what we've been doing these last few weeks. So we have a process in the local church, what they call the lay leadership nominations process. And we're not going to call it that, but it's like student leadership process where people say, hey, I'm interested in all of these different avenues in leading. That could be small groups. That could be Monday night, putting together the Monday night meals, which is talking with local businesses, organizations, and churches to get those put together for every Monday night. It's a free meal for all students. Whoever wants to come eat. Wednesday night worship leadership. So like band members, band leaders, the person that's going to be like the head honcho of that and get everything put together. Monday nights, prayer service, someone that kind of puts all of that together, who gets our musician, who's going to lead the prayers, who's going to break out to the breakout groups, our small group leaders, which I may have already mentioned. But all of those different things that you kind of see in the local church, we kind of do the same things. We may not call them the same, but we want student interests to lead those. It's not on, it shouldn't be on me. And not to say that I'm not going to work. That's not
You're there to facilitate,
yes.
But
yeah, it's student led, like what we want to happen in the churches. It's lay led. It's led by the people, and that's Wesleyan. I mean, that's just people lead, and we help guide and offer all of the resources that we can possibly offer to help those that are leading. And so that's kind of how we do it here at Wesley. That's how we kind of structure it. We have student leadership meetings. I meet with the co-presidents at least once a week. We used to go to lunch once a week and just talk about everything that's going on, what I needed to know about, what I needed them to know about. So we're all on the same page. And we have student leadership meetings, which you may call in the church your church council or your admin council. We're not going to call it that. But just to have conversation. We're not voting on anything, but conversation about, hey, here's what's coming up. What do you guys think about that? And what do you need from me to offer to you or get for you to make it happen? So that's kind of how our student stuff works. It's really, it's a blessing to have students have ownership and take these leadership skills. I mean, they're definitely learning things through the Wesley Foundation that they can put on a resume to say that they have led something and have taken ownership and are doing it. Somebody's not doing it for them. It's a great blessing.
Now, the students that are active, it's probably something that my students would presume, but maybe I just want to clarify. Are the students that are active in the Wesley Foundation Methodists? Did they come out of a Methodist tradition growing up, or?
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say a majority probably have the Methodist background and that they learned about the Wesley Foundation through their youth ministry.
Mm.
Now well, hold on, I'll get to that in a second. Uh, but we do have some that come from different traditions because they were invited by their friends and other students that they met in their classes. You have dorm mates that just met each other and are coming together because one learned about youth group and has invited their dorm mate. It is not a place where at the door somebody's gonna ask, "Are you Methodist?" I don't care.
They
I
need
don't
to know all four sides of the Wesleyan quadrilateral in order
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah. Don't ask me about that. Yeah, so yeah, like this is a place for any student that wants to come and be a part of something and to learn and to grow in their faith and to question faith and to question what we all believe and why we believe it. So no, it's not a Methodist thing. We have several Baptist. Actually, this is quite fun. It's weird how such a small world. One of the students is a member of First Baptist in Mount Holly, and which is not far from where I grew up. I grew up in Stanley. It's their neighboring towns, and like he knew my cousin who was the youth minister at that church several years ago. So he was like a kid when my cousin was there. Um, but it's just kind of neat to see that like he wasn't like, oh, this is Methodist, I'm not coming. He's a very devoted and wants to be just a part of not a large group,
Mhm.
but a very um, middle-sized. I would call it. You know how you have the different sizes of churches. You know, like large church. We're not large church. We're not small church. We're middle-sized church. You know everybody, but you still got a good number of presence in the place.
Yeah, creating that sense of belonging that
Right.
transcends religious
Yeah.
allegiances and
I'll say this:
builds
you
on
can't
social ties.
you can't walk in Wesley and try to hide. I'll put it that way. Now you can try, but you're going to be seen, and we want to see you and be hospitable to you.
Okay. Some campus groups, what used to be called Campus Crusade for Christ, now I believe it's what, Crew,
Yeah, yeah, cool.
and InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and I think we may have at least one more that do the large, let's meet in this room, this large lecture room. Let's meet in IG Greer.
Yeah.
Elevation Church from Charlotte area used to do that
Uh,
for a number of years at least. And that's how they would do a lot of not all of their outreach, but a fair amount of their outreach would
yeah.
be to invite students to come worship with us. We'll have fellowship time. We'll have worship. How does the Wesley Foundation reach out to students, or are there regular activities that you do that are open and advertised to
Yeah.
the campus
Yeah.
community? Is there anything like a volunteering or kind of a mission style work in the community that you then reach out to the campus community to take part in?
Yeah, definitely. What stinks is we weren't able to like gear 100% into that this semester. There were a lot of things coming up that we were excited about, but so yeah, there are a lot of mission opportunities in the fall. There's a community Haywood congregation in Asheville. It is a very open United Methodist community in Asheville. Really cool. If you haven't been there, check them out. But they go every year down there and help and learn. A lot of our students are involved with Carolina Cross Connection and a ton, not only United Methodist summer camps, but like just summer camps are involved in those arenas. And so we have relationships with our camps we have relationship with, of course, Boone United Methodist Church, and every Saturday, students are out there, and this is not a male driven thing. This is males and females. You go out there and you cut wood. Uh, yeah, so
Okay.
you cut wood, and they deliver wood to folks as who that is their only source of energy or heating source.
Oh, okay.
So they have, an anonymous list of all these individuals that they go deliver this. They get all of this donation of wood that land may have been cleared out, and it gets dropped off at the back of Boone Methodist. And every Saturday, I don't know what they're doing right now, but every Saturday you just go out there and take your axe, or what, they got tons of them, so you just go out there and just start hammering away at it. Yeah, that's a great way to go knock out your frustrations from a week of class. But
I'm gonna say, I wonder if the wood production increases right after midterms.
right. There's that. They have retreat weekends, not only in the fall but the spring. So it's more of not really mission work, but just let's get to know each other and grow our faith. So it could be different varying themes on what that may look like. One thing that I was excited about was we were starting a relationship with App Builds a Home.
Mm.
And so that's kind of been put on pause. But we were super excited. We were trying to get in at the this semester to finish that house. And hopefully they were able to do that with the groups that they had already signed up. But since there was such great interest, we weren't able to get in on the calendar. But we were put on the, let's say, maybe like the leadership board of App Builds a Home for next year. And so we were excited to be partnership in that and how we could move forward. So I don't know where that's going to go, but I'm super excited to have App Wesley be a part of that and just have dates on our calendar for our students just to go out and help someone in our own community and who is actually an Appalachian staff member for this next year's home. They'll be building for a staff member. Another thing that we did, I just like to think outside the box, not like quote unquote churchy things, but just events where people can just gather and be people. So we worked with the Humane Society during midterm week to have cats and dogs brought to Wesley so that they could just have like downtime with cats and dogs. Didn't really work out the way we wanted it to work out.
Cats and dogs. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
well, what happened? What happened is we had some cats. We advertised cats and dogs, and we had cats. So we felt kind of bad about that. But we had several students from around campus that we had not seen before enter the building and just have that time to just kind of de-stress for a moment and interact with an animal. So we look forward to doing some more partnerships like that with our area nonprofits, and just kind of advertise that way, not like we're trying to do ploys or nothing like that. Just, hey, just come hang out. I know you need a place to just de-stress, to be chill, and to just be with other friends and family members who are along this journey with you.
Okay. Well, speaking of things that are on pause, how are you making your way through being a Wesleyan campus minister, your first full, now, if I'm right, your first full spring semester
Yeah.
on the job, and the Wesley Foundation's empty as campus is empty?
Yeah.
What does your ministry look like these days?
So, when we were on spring break, and they started, um, app started their new COVID website, I kept on top of that, and I kept alerting our students because I didn't know if they were getting all that information or sort of knew what was happening. So as App was building their emergency website, I built our website to have the emergency section as well. And so while that was happening and they were getting information on how they would continue with classes, extended spring break, not knowing what was going to happen, I was like, we need to get ahead of this. And how are we going to move forward? And so what I decided that we were going to do is, since it was, that extended spring break, we were still in that temporary space. It's like, hey, we're going to do this till April 1st. Well, now that's out of this is through the end of the year. But we immediately set up through Uber Conference. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I am
But
looking at the Wesley Foundation website right now.
yeah, so I wanted to be as easy as possible because I knew that our students were going to be inundated with information from the university and their professors on what they needed to do. I was like, I don't need to be a professor and I don't need to have tons of information going to them that they're really not going to read right now because this is not going to be at the forefront of their brains.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't blame them. Why should it be? Because there's just too much to try and digest at that moment. So I decided we would move with Uber Conference. Nothing to download, nothing to log in. You just go directly to our Uber Conference page. Anybody, you could go there right now and start a conference. Like you yourself could go there right now, start a conference. Now nobody's going to join you because you didn't advertise it, but I mean, I'll join you there. But you just kind of wait there, and it's just like this open space. Anybody can just join in, and that's what we started to do for our Monday night stuff. So we weren't going to have our meal anymore, but we were going to continue our prayer and praise. So we still do that Monday nights at 7. We have our musician rotation. They send me songs. I put them on the screen share. So everybody still mutes themselves, but in their own space, they sing along. We still take prayer requests. We now do it by website instead of by paper. I share those. We do a popcorn prayer on there. So it still actually ends up being an hour of a prayer and praise service. We're just doing it a little bit differently. We're not having, the numbers like we would have in person, and that's understandable. It's, some people it's going to work, some it's not going to work for them, and some it's not even on the radar, and that's perfectly okay. I want them to know that. But if you need the space, it's there. I knew that wasn't sort of going to work for our Wednesday night stuff. And Wednesday nights where we have a full worship service. So we have the worship band, a sermon, we have a prayer time, everything you normally have in a worship service. So what I decided we would do with that is a podcast so that it would drop every Wednesday night like our regular worship service would be, but it's always available. So if Wednesday doesn't work for you, it's going to be available Wednesday night, but then you can be a part and listen to it whenever you can. And so we've had pretty good success with that. I think we're averaging around 25 listeners to that after it's dropped for a week. And what I decided to do is I didn't want our worship band to be like, we're done, So what I have is started a rotation. One of our worship band participants will record themselves playing and singing music. And I'll put those songs in. I'll preach. So it's not really like preaching, but it's more of a conversation around a piece of scripture. And we're still finishing up Lent and Easter series and all that stuff. We have our student who does our witness and testimony talks. And I've been getting our seniors in because we would be celebrating our seniors right now. And I've been having them record themselves about what life's like, where they're going, what they're looking forward to in the future. Yeah. And so it ends up being about a 30 to 40 minute podcast where it's still, again, it's student led. Their voices are the ones that are being heard. I'm only on there for like 15 minutes talking about some scripture. The rest of the time, it is our students who have recorded, who have taken the time to record themselves, email it to me so I can put it in the playlist, and it drops. And that's right now. It's sort of how we're doing things. One thing I'm excited about. Hopefully, it's going to work. They have till tonight. I don't know when this is going to air, but it's Friday. It's Good Friday, and so they have till tonight to submit to be a part of the virtual Easter worship praise team or worship band. So the United Methodist Church put out a thing. It actually dropped today, an Easter choir, worldwide choir that sang Christ the Lord is risen today. And what happens is, we're not doing that. We're doing some praise songs, but they can go to the website, put their earbuds in, listen to the song and sing. And so I'll take their voices, mash it all together so that we have our full praise band together for next week's Easter podcast. So I'm pretty excited about that. If I can just get them to upload their music. I know they're doing it. I'm like, do it, upload it. I got to get this thing edited together.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty excited about that. Just, just the different ways that we can still be together when we're not like physically together.
Yeah. And of course, there's also being dispersed. Many of my students being home with their families are basically back into whatever their local congregation situation is. And so you have that kind of cacophony of ministry opportunities going on for any of the students who were involved in a house of worship, in either in Boone or back in their home communities
Yeah.
for many of them. Which I guess brings me to my last real question for the recorded conversation, and that's, what are you looking forward to in the fall, assuming everybody's,
Yeah.
whatever the new normal may be, if we are back together physically in Boone, are you just going to throw one giant Wesley Foundation party for all the students that come back and are at the Wesley Foundation together again, fellowshipping in person? Are you thinking that far ahead at all?
Oh no, I'm definitely. I had a conversation before we were like, don't even be 6 feet from each other. I had a conversation with a student who came back to their apartment, and they just dropped by the Wesley Foundation just to say hey, and they were like, man, it's just so weird. It's so quiet. What are we going to do? I know churches talk about Easter and all of that. And I said to them, because Easter Sunday, I said, we as Wesleyans, and probably the whole entire worldwide church believes that every Sunday is a mini Easter. We are resurrection people. We believe in that, and it's not just a one-day event. And I said, Easter's coming up. Easter's going to be Sunday, but let me tell you, when churches are able to be back together in person, when we as Wesley are able to be back in the upstairs worship space, that's going to be one glorious resurrection, powerful worship service. Not only because it's the first time back, but just because we're able to just be together, united as the body of Christ. That's what I'm excited about for our fall semester. If it's able to happen, whenever it's going to happen, I don't know what that's going to look like. All I know is that it's going to be filled with spirit, and God's grace is already planning that right now. And when it happens, we'll see what God's been doing, and it'll be just, I don't know. We'll blow the windows out. I don't know. It's going to be exciting. Yeah.
All right. Well, Reverend Justin Smith, thank you for talking to us today. Thank you for your time. Happy Easter. I know it's Good Friday, so it's sort of a somber, reflective time at the moment of this conversation, but looking forward to a couple days from now. Happy Easter, and
same to you guys.
Just thank you for what you do.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, and thank you for letting me share. I appreciate it.